What's up, everybody? Thralls here once again. I'm Necrotic.
I'm Jammin John.
And we have yet another album review for you. Remember a little while ago when we reviewed Vitriol and I said this might be the heaviest thing I've heard this year, and it probably would be for the entire year. I was premature on that one. I did say maybe on there, and it was a maybe. So today we are going over the latest offering from Meth, simply titled Shame. This comes out also on the 2nd of February on Prosthetic Records. This band formed in Chicago, Illinois, sometime before 2017, which was when their first EP dropped. This is their second full-length. I found out about them on their first full-length, Mother of Red Light, which now, in retrospective, seems very tame compared to what we just listened to. This is an experimental metal / sludge hardcore band. It's some of the most heavy, visceral, traumatic,
darker than the darkest dark, unrelentingly heavy. This record's gonna put me back on Zoloft.
Yeah, sonically, emotionally, metaphorically, figuratively, other things. This is just an absolute monster of an album, and I wanted to check it out just because I saw, some rumblings about it, and I did remember the first one being pretty damn heavy, but again, one of those bands that's just kind of hard to classify. So we kind of just went into this one a little bit blind, because, I had listened to this band before. It had been a while since I listened to their first album, and it might be a while before I listened to it again, if it sounds anything like this, because this might have pushed the limits in terms of just sheer ferocity and musical anguish.
You see us both here, shaking our heads. It's something else. It is a completely different monster from, most anything. Kind of like we said Vitriol was going to be the heaviest thing, and it's not. Yeah, this is you watched a snuff film and now you can't tell anyone about it. No, you're just going to have to eat that feeling for the rest of your life. And reading behind this band, in terms of, the relatively pleasant album cover, man, is that misleading. I guess the whole theme behind this was about, innocence being shattered and just, how life can just come in and just rain down horror and trauma and tragedy and death and, addiction. That's a big part of it, too. They didn't name their band that for no reason. The sound of it, I guess, if you want to equate it to the loss of innocence, it might be akin to, the first time that life really just gives you the shaft and you're not sure how to handle that because it's never happened to you before. So it's traumatic, and you just don't know what to do about it, and it's just the anguish and feeling of that, and that's pretty much this record in its entirety. Kicks off with the song Doubt, and immediately it is the heaviest, gnarliest, darkest thing ever. Heavy, down-tuned, droning chugs, these somewhat semi-distant anguish screams.
Yeah. It's one repeated chug over these giant floor tom hits and occasionally snare and then the double bass underneath.
Yeah.
It is so caustic sounding. Immediately you should be reminded of bands like Primitive Man, Indian, for anyone that's a fan of that just super sludgy noise metal band. That band, I might rival this one to a degree, but there's something else about this one that just, I don't know, kind of just creeps me out. And it could be the vocals, because the vocals seem like they change distance from the microphone. Sometimes it's layered, sometimes it's pleading, sometimes it's just tortured screams, which is the case in Doubt. It literally sounds like they recorded the vocalist inside of a very dark, very damp storage unit and, just kept telling them, we have your family. Sing for us.
But they made him stand at the back of the storage unit. They immediately pushed him in Blair Witch style and made him stand in the corner. Scream.
Speaking of Blair Witch, it doesn't sound like he's alone in that storage unit, because you get these alternating growls in between his desperate screams, and Yeah, it's extra creepy. The song only drops out for a moment to repeat yet another droning riff. Like it gets a little bit cleaner, and then all of a sudden it comes in possibly heavier than before. And honestly, in retrospect, this is a relatively tame track on here.
That's fair. In all honesty, there's not much to the track itself musically outside of these chugs. In this case, I think it's setting the pace for the more unsettling atmosphere.
Yeah. It kind of reminded me of like Godflesh right out of the gate because, again, very minimalist, has one kind of driving rhythm. But when you get down to like the atmosphere, like generally there's like a little bit of space in Godflesh, like so you can actually make out the samples and the keys and synths and such. There's no space on here. Like every conceivable level of sound is occupied by ungodly terror and just the most shrill and caustic of sounds, like Compulsion. Compulsion opens right away with it's a wall. It is a wall of dissonance and atonal everything, and it's a combination of the guitars, the bass. There are keys on here too, and they are not played pleasantly.
No, it's like a constant whistling feedback. It's not overly loud, but it's there. It's enough to get stuck in your brain, and you're just like, Jesus.
And behind that, there, I believe, are screams. Like, it is the most horrifying opening to a song I think I've heard in a while. It's pretty much every awful sound woven into a blanket of misery, and it just is thrown over you, and then they beat the hell out of you with like hammers or something. But the song starts like kind of shifting around. Like I thought it was going to be mostly this like kind of steady, rhythmic, almost tribal percussion throughout most of this, but you get alternating like blast beats on here, and some interesting little groovy pockets that show up later. But it's a lot of that floor tom hit, and it's just like rhythmic battery.
And hitting them quite possibly as hard as he can, and they're just, the way it's mixed, they're just giant. It's almost like they have a pulse when he hits them.
Yeah, I would say that those, pulsating floor tom hits are kind of the pulse of this album, because that is like kind of the rhythm that pops up a lot, like it is on both Doubt and Compulsion. It also shows up on Blackmail, and it also shows up on the title track too. Like these guys like to get into sort of like almost meditative sort of trance-like thing where it is just like a rhythmic pulse and a droning riff or a very atonal, squawky melody, or it could be all those things just kind of coming at you. But they hang on to those while the frontman screams his guts out. And I actually looked at some of the lyrics, and they are very dark, like almost like a grocery list of like the most awful, horrible things that people go through in terms of like just mental anguish.
It does get more musical per se, more melodic on both Blush and Blackmail. Like those two songs showcase moments of melody and or groove, but like done by Converge and Dillinger Escape Plan on their worst days of being live.
Yeah, throw in a little bit of Will Haven too, stir and boil, and then dump on your body and scream as you die. But it is like noticeably more musical, just in terms of like there are transitions that kind of move around the song. Like it isn't necessarily just a rhythmic pounding of misery. There are cool blast beat sections. I really like the drum work on Blush in particular. Like there's a lot of very like Ben Kohler sort of like drum fills, like the pockets of blasts and turnovers. And there are some moments on there that are a little bit more, I don't know, like riffy doesn't feel like the right word, but like melodic-ish.
I don't know. I see, because I wrote down riffs. Blackmail has riffs. I don't know what to say, because yes and no. Like they're there, but it's mostly just down-tuned single-note chugs as far as a riff is concerned. Like on the song Shame, there is a brief moment where it has this kind of ascending dissonant melody, so to speak, and it happens a couple times. It could almost be considered the hook of that song.
I mean, that song is definitely a standout, and mainly because you have like this well, more like ambient. I don't want to call it soft because there's nothing soft like this is soft like sandpaper soft. But there is like a melody that kind of carries over, and this is the only one that has cleaner vocals. Like it's more of like a chant or a spoken word, and it really builds in intensity till you get to the chorus, which it's hard to even describe what the guitars are doing. Like it sounds like they're stretchy and kind of like slinky guitar lines. They're like someone looped noises from alarm clocks and just said that is our melody. But the song kind of comes together well, though. Like there's some really cool turnovers again. I think the drummer seems like the only one that's like, yeah, no, everything's fine with me. I just have to follow like what these guys are doing because they all got some issues. But it stays a little bit more grounded, and again, like the break in the just wall of just noise and ugliness is kind of nice in there.
Yeah, there's a portion where there's an isolated drum and bass section, which oddly enough reminds me of something Primus would do. I mean, obviously it's not mellow like that, but the concept there of that jam and how it's isolated and like a little bit more spacey just reminds me of Primus after the mushrooms kick in.
It's a bad trip. A bad trip. And yeah, no, they are watching people's faces just gush blood and,
melt off the stage.
Yeah, it's just bad. Like, the two dudes from Indiana Jones, Raiders of the Lost Ark. It's just that on repeat. An entire crowd of that while they're playing live. I can see the beads of sweat forming on their foreheads right now with their looks of horror. Man, that would be a Primus show to remember forever. Now, the biggest surprise on here, well, next to like hearing some kind of clean vocals on the title track, was the song Give In. Honestly, it's the most musical one, and, after the first 3 tracks, you are just beaten down. Like, Give In was kind of the emotion I was at after the first 3 tracks, because, again, merciless.
Yep.
Heavier than everything. But this song is just a kind of very moody, very fluid sounding jam. Like, it has a lot of, like, character to it, and, I mean, to a degree, melody. Like, it's still very dissonant and very atonal, but there is, like, discernible melody, and the way the song flows with its peaks and valleys, honestly, I think it's, like, my biggest standout on here.
Actually, it oddly reminded me of the Deftones. The groove that's in there, albeit it's polyrhythmic and such, it's really relaxed. And, like, there are some, again, melodies here. It's almost like the darkest Deftones song you'll ever hear.
Yeah, the rhythm itself kind of reminds me of, like, kind of like a Danny Carey sort of, like, polyrhythm. Like, there's some accented toms on there, and it kind of just rolls and flows. It's like a little bit off time, but it kind of matches up really well, and even the harsher vocals kind of play off of this rhythm really well.
Yeah.
But in terms of, like, the ambience and the guitars and such, it has the feeling of more like a Cave-In song. Or if you go further down, like the Cave-In rabbit hole, something more akin to Zozobra, which was Caleb Scoville's last project before he sadly passed. Or again, Willhaven. Like, it kind of has that with, the big heavy droning riffs and the ambient melodies behind it, and then someone shrieking like a lunatic on top of that. I mean, that can describe a good chunk of Willhaven stuff, and I absolutely love it. It still maintains that creepy, just unsettling nature, but there's, like, a legit hook to it. And I really like that. Even in the heavier sections, but there are some, like, big, pounding, again, floor tom sections with, like, gorilla death roars on it. But it remains oddly catchy, which is kind of a cool contrast for the vocals on the majority of that song, because they mostly sound like they're being shouted at the end of a very long hallway, like he's completely off of the mic. And again, there's a lot of, like, interesting vocal dynamics on here, like a lot of layering and just putting filters over them. But I thought that one in particular, I don't know, it felt more like the sense of isolation and shit. And I guess, again, we have to go for all the negative emotions on here because happiness was not invited to this album.
Not at all. And then to stir things back up, the song Cruelty, a very odd melody, like a drunken ambulance siren. More odd drum patterns. Again, it just takes you back off the rails. Give In was the only time that you might have felt something different other than confusion and torment. because Cruelty just drags you right back under. I got reminded of early Iron Dissonance, like Solace or Breathing is Irrelevant even. Like when they were really unhinged and not real put together, a lot of that dissonant chugging and just kind of atypical song structure, that was Cruelty to me.
I got reminded of Imperial Triumphant, like right out of the gate. Like it has the weird jazzy fills too, and I mean it sounds like it was written while they were being attacked by hornets, or locked in a room filled with venomous snakes, or however Imperial Triumphant records their albums. The drums are on point, like they're crazy good. Like he's got awesome fills on there, but it's that just whirlwind of insane, just dissonant kind of noodling. Like they're just picking points on the fretboard and like, here, combine those 4 points, and what does that sound like? Awful. Cool. Record it. Like it sounds like the song itself was in a car wreck, and then instead of getting mechanics to reassemble the car, they got like certified lunatics to do it. And yeah, it's just a decidedly uncomfortable, weird song, which I know that kind of describes like a lot of this, but I mean that song in particular just feels chaotic as hell.
And it is super dissonant, and not the cool kind of dissonant.
I mean, you are our resident dissonant expert.
I am the resident dissonant hound, but this is something different.
So when it comes down to like actually like reviewing this, like this is actually tricky, because on one side, this is something that I struggle to really get into. Like there is a level of dissonance that I can tolerate, and this is well beyond that. This is even well beyond Vitriol, and kind of borders more on Portal, except they liked, sludge and hardcore a bit more than death metal.
Portal as far as the atmosphere is concerned, but it would be Portal if they turned up the music and turned down the atmosphere.
Well, I don't know. See, I would still say the atmosphere is up. It's different. Like Portal is like designed to be terrifying, like to completely just scare you till you shit your pants.
I mean, yeah, records like Hagbalbia and such, like that was unsettling. But like,
never listen to that again.
Some of Portal, at least from what I've listened to, and I haven't really dove real deep into Portal, but some of what I heard, at least in like the earlier side of their career, there was actual like music going on. It was just far off in the distance. Like you had to really kind of listen for it.
Vexavoid.
Yeah,
Vexavoid's pretty decent. Yeah.
This brings the music more to the forefront, along with the Portal-like atmosphere.
Well, to a degree, because again, like the atmosphere is unsettling, but it's unsettling in a different way. It's more about like anguish. I know they again have themes about addiction and like abandonment, recovery, like just the most dark aspects of real life. Like there's nothing supernatural about this. This is just real life trauma put on an album. And while I can appreciate the sheer ferocity and the relentless just battering that this album gives you, and probably to some degree like some catharsis amongst the band members and possibly the audiences that see this live, it's just a little bit too much for me as far as like, do I want to come back and like listen to this? Because I feel like this is like, recalling a dark memory and then just being stuck with it. Like, this is just, it's hard to listen to, but at the same time, it's hard not to be kind of sucked in just because it is so dark.
Yeah, like the morbid curiosity took over, because I'll admit, some of these songs are a chore to get to in the sense because they're so... Again, like the weight of it, the actual physical weight of it, we would listen to a song and then have to stop it and just take a breather before we dove into the next one, because it is just so immersive. To be honest with you, I'm not 100% that I could sit through the whole thing again. So overall, I'm going to give this 3 stars. It is heavier than shit. And even to say heavy doesn't really describe it. And from the beginning note all the way until the end, it doesn't let up. Even in Given, where it's a little bit more like shoegazy, they still find ways to incorporate the heaviest, most caustic sounds you ever heard. It's just a lot. It's a full sonic assault. It's unsettling. It's almost sickening at times. There's the harmonies that they choose in Blackmail. Harmonies sounds physically sickening. Like I said in the beginning of the video, this might put me back on Zoloft. It is utterly depressive. We sat down here for a while before we turned on the camera. We were like,
Are you okay? No.
No. If you're fans of bands like Nightmare, Godflesh, Imperial Triumphant, Portal, Primitive Man, Willhaven, Dillinger Escape Plan, and a lot of just bands that are disgustingly caustic and dark and heavier than shit, you might like this. You're probably not going to hear something this heavy again this year. You might. I don't know. 2024 is a shocker so far.
I was already wrong about that. Yeah. 2024 is the year of traumatic music. If I'm being honest here, I got to go with a 2.5 just because I don't think I'll probably return to this outside of maybe the song Give In. If this album was weather, it would be a tornado filled with used hypodermic needles, broken glass, and human teeth. This is just one of the most relentless, dark things I've listened to. And, you know, again, it's not that supernatural dark. It's like more real dark.
Yeah.
Like this is real anguish. So, I know, like even looking at the lyrics, like there's some stuff in there. I was like, yeah, no, I mean, I felt that maybe, you know, minus the addiction stuff. Lucky me. But this is like just a nightmare. Like you feel like you are trapped in a nightmare listening to this. Now, granted, you could turn it off at any time, but at the same time, you're kind of curious, you know, how much further it goes as far as being heavy and insane. And honestly, it does get like progressively darker. Again, Give In is the only spot of just like the faintest light, like not a lot, like just peeking through like the keyhole of the room that you're locked in, filled with like rabid badgers and other horrible things. This is unreal in terms of how heavy it is. And again, just unrelenting across the board. But again, I am like kind of impressed with it. But again, like this isn't something I would return to just because I want to sleep at night. There are even sections on here where they seem like they've exhausted themselves to the point where they have like just played too hard, they're about to collapse, and then the inevitable freak out comes out after that, and then, oh no, we're back, we have more trauma to go through. Yeah, this is just a nuts listen, and I mean, I would still recommend checking it out. It is quite the experience. You probably won't forget listening to it.
No.
Very much akin, again, to bands like Primitive Man. I would especially say Indian again, too. Like, Indian in specific. Yeah, if you haven't checked out that band, well, I mean, they're kind of similar to this one, so check them out, I guess. It's going to be wild. But yeah, so far, 2024 has yielded some absolutely terrifying music. And I wasn't anticipating that so early in the year. So we'll see what the rest of the year brings. But yeah, I would still say check this out. Again, if you're just looking for something that is just peak levels of darkness, dissonance, and musical and emotional heft, this is it. This hopefully is it. Like, I hope I can say right now, this is probably the heaviest, darkest thing I will listen to this year. I said before, I know, on Vitriol, and I was wrong. I'm really hoping I'm not now.
If it gets heavier, you're going to have to send a wellness check for us, because I don't know. I don't know if I want to hear heavier than this.
So, if you enjoyed this review, give it a thumbs up. And if you're new to the channel, subscribe, because we do stuff like this all the time. We are also on Patreon. If you'd like to help us out there, there's a link down below to thrallsmetal.com. Our Patreon link is there. It is also on our channel up on the banner in the bottom right-hand corner. But if you're looking for Thralls Metal stuff, you have to go to thrallsmetal.com. We have new shirts there. We have old shirts that are discounted if we have your size. We also have hats there, so if you're looking for any of that stuff, click the link down below.
Tons more from Thralls of Metal on the way between album reviews. There's a ton of them. We've got discography rankings coming. Black Dahlia Murder here will be filmed in a couple weeks. And then after that, we have Meshuggah. Both of those are going to suck horribly bad to rank. Got Nick's Collections updates. What's John Jamming will return at some point. I know I keep saying that and promising that, but I'm not even going to tell you all what's happening in my life right now. Nick's States of Metal. I'm sure now we got Ren back, he'll bring something entertaining. Just tons of stuff going on. We couldn't do it without you guys, though. It's all for you. Thank you all for making Thralls of Metal what it is. Making it beyond just a few dudes sitting in a basement talking about metal. It's become a gigantic part of our lives. I'm so thankful and grateful to have Thralls of Metal. But again, it wouldn't be without you guys. Thank you.
Yeah, it's been an amazing journey so far, over 5 years in. Technically, like, well, we're a little bit over 5 years, but 5 years doing this, it's been a killer ride. You guys have been absolutely awesome to talk to in the comments, and it shows and all that stuff. And yeah, we're just going to keep working on cranking out as much interesting metal related material as we possibly can. So one more big thank you, because you guys are awesome, and we will catch you later.